Subscribe because it is free.
The Veltraxi dreadnoughts entered Earth's orbit without warning, blacking out half the sky. No demands, no diplomacy, just a synchronized shutdown of every satellite, power grid, and military network. One moment, life was running like it always did. TikToks take out political chaos. And the next, humanity was staring into the metallic belly of an empire that had never lost a war. Resistance didn't last a day. The Pentagon disappeared in a beam of violet light. NORAD tried to launch retaliatory strikes, but the nukes refused to launch, their code scrambled by some kind of psychic override. Every continent had their own version of the story. Jets falling from the sky, tanks shutting down, entire armies standing helpless as their weapons turned to deadweight. 8 hours after arrival, the Veltraxi declared Earth subjugated. Their emissaries weren't towering monsters or cruel overlords. They looked deficient. All silver limbs and levitating platforms, voices like static in a cathedral. They didn't scream or punish. They simply expected obedience, the same way you'd expect a toaster to toast. They called us Species 913. We were relocated, reclassified as Class 5 bioutility units, workforces, maintenance drones with better fingers. Millions were scooped up and shipped off-planet to serve in factories, shipyards, and waste recycling moons. Neural compliance collars were installed, a thin ring behind the ear that encouraged tranquility. For most species, it reduced brain function to a cooperative hum. For humans, it mostly caused migraines and sarcasm. One man, Arthur Briggs, 54, Ohio, was assigned to scrub air vents aboard the Veltraxi processing station orbiting Demos 9. When asked to state his classification, he muttered, "Darth Rebellious, intergalactic toaster." The translator collar didn't catch the joke and logged it without issue. The Veltraxi didn't understand irony. They filed his sarcasm under verbal anomaly and carried on. They didn't get us. They thought obedience was default. That fear, once instilled, would calcify into loyalty. Maybe that worked with the squealing, six-eyed species from Glaxon Prime, or the fish people from Gorlum who practically begged to be ruled. But not with humans. We played along at first, cleaned their messes, took orders, sorted alien waste, pretended not to understand the control panels we were stationed beside. They thought we were broken, defeated, passive, but they didn't see what was really happening. We were watching, cataloging, memorizing the way they moved, the gaps in their security, how their systems relied on a single psychic frequency band. We were slowly learning to spoof. There were glitches, not technical ones, behavioral ones. A man on Scepter refused to move for 3 hours, claiming he'd entered existential maintenance mode. A woman in charge of sorting tools began rearranging them by how much they reminded her of her ex. A pair of former IT guys kept taking apart alien tech just to see what happens. These weren't acts of open rebellion. They were symptoms of minds refusing to fold. Milo Reyes, 17 years old, ended up assigned to a mining barge above Eric's, too. His job was surface ash removal. Essentially, he cleaned soot from blast vents with an alien toothbrush. After 2 weeks, Milo realized something odd. The compliance collars ran on microbursts of entangled pulse signals. And those signals glitched if you overloaded them with rapid eye movement. So he blinked in patterns. Morse code at first, just to see if he could disrupt the signal. On day 10, he managed to shut off his own collar for 4.2 seconds. That was enough to make the guard drones flinch. The moment passed and the collar rebooted, but Milo had seen it, a crack in the wall. Meanwhile, across the Veltraxi slave sectors, humans began developing habits. In some outposts, they formed singing groups. The Veltraxi couldn't parse music. It was classified as sonic inefficiency, and ignored it. But those songs contained messages, coordination, rebellion plans encoded in harmony and off-key verses. On the volcanic moon Rildas, a colony of 800 humans started pretending to worship a rock they named Greg. Every day, they knelt before Greg, offered recycled soup, and whispered secrets to it. The Veltraxi believed it was a primitive ritual and let it continue. What they didn't know, Greg was hollow, Inside was a stolen data transmitter, rigged to beam encrypted updates to a rogue satellite looping just beyond their scan range. We didn't rise all at once. It was a movie moment where everyone stands up together and flips the bird at their captors. It was 1,000 little acts of defiance, refusing to respond to numbers, naming each other, laughing during mandatory silence cycles. One guy hacked a garbage sorter to build a sculpture of middle fingers using scrap metal. Another taught a group of 4-armed aliens to play poker, and then fleece them every night while subtly recruiting them. The Veltraxi noticed, eventually, their reports grew more confused. One memo from Overseer Kell 9 read, Species 913 shows signs of irrational noncompliance. Subunits display unpredictable self-harm through humor. Inhibitor signal appears ineffective against internal resistance behaviors. Further observation required. They thought it was a psychological anomaly, a quirk. They didn't realize it was the beginning of something older than war, older than oppression. Rebellion wasn't just strategy to us. It was instinct. On Juno Station, an engineer named Asha ran diagnostics on power coils. She noticed the station AI could be tricked into rerouting access privileges if you fed it contradictory commands in specific syntactic patterns. She taught this trick to 3 other techs. They taught it to 7 more. Within weeks, humans had unlocked restricted access to tool bays, surveillance feeds, and navigation relays. We didn't strike yet. Not fully. The Veltraxi still thought they held the leash. But the leash was fraying, and no one told them. A low-ranking overseer named Traux once asked a human why they constantly smiled during labor. The human replied, because every second I spend working is 1 second closer to you realizing we're not scared of you. We're just patient. That one got logged as a direct threat. Traux was reassigned, probably to something involving less conversation. Meanwhile, on an outpost drifting near the black hole emissary's maw, 3 humans figure out how to bounce messages using gravitational lensing. Took them weeks. One of them was an astrophysicist. The other 2 were board janitors. That signal linked 12 different labor groups into a shared network, a web of whispers, names, targets, plans. We were learning. We weren't just surviving the strongest empire in the galaxy. We were adapting to them, and we were laughing while we did it. A month after Milo's collar blinked off, he could disable it at will for 60 full seconds. He hadn't told anyone yet, but the grin he wore while sweeping soot-off blast panels was starting to make the guards nervous. He wasn't the only one. Earth's children were growing teeth in the Empire's belly, and they were starting to bite. On the way station orbit data, a former plumber named Dana repurposed an atmospheric scrubber into a crude EMP emitter. She disguised it as a bidet. When it fired, 2 surveillance drones fell out of the sky mid-hover and crashed into a compost chute. She reported a plumbing mishap, and the overseers blamed moisture interference. The thing about being underestimated is you can get away with nearly anything if you make it look dumb enough. That became the unofficial rule of what humans started calling the DIY Legion. They weren't soldiers. Not yet. They were electricians, janitors, baristas, game modders, conspiracy theorists, people who had no business being rebels but every reason to try. Back on Eric's, too, Milo passed along his collar exploit to an ex-cybersecurity consultant named Yvette. She didn't blink Morse code. She snorted during shift breaks. 3 other workers thought she had a deviated septum. She didn't. She was running diagnostics on the Veltraxi network while pretending to nap. Once the signal started sinking across more colonies, things escalated. Micro-revolts sprang up in isolated sectors. Not grand ones, nothing the Dominion could call a proper rebellion, but enough to get noticed. A food-based processing plant on Callus. 8 began shipping prod containers with embedded circuitry fragments, a primitive meshnet node. A janitor on the freighter VA Rune's Mercy rerouted the waste disposal AI to scan for code phrases embedded in graffiti. A glitched maintenance drone drew what looked like spirals on a bulkhead. It was a map. Even the compliance collars weren't safe anymore. On a station orbiting a gas giant, an amputee mechanic named Harper built a deactivator using scavenged power cells and a fork. She called it the Detangler. It looked like a hairbrush. It got past every security scan. The Veltraxi couldn't process it. Not just a rebellion. They'd seen rebellion before. What they couldn't comprehend was how. No meetings, no flags, no leaders. Just people doing small things with enormous intent. Every action looked like a mistake until it didn't. That was humanity's advantage. Creativity born out of boredom and defiance. The Veltraxi were powerful, but they weren't clever. Their tech was brilliant but sterile. No improvisation. No chaos. Everything was built to work exactly as designed, which meant it broke spectacularly when used against itself. A prime example. On Station Varn Delta, 2 human engineers reprogrammed the ambient light system to trigger seizures in the overseers. They disguised it as a seasonal shift celebration and submitted a formal request for cultural exemption. The request was approved. 9 overseers were temporarily blinded. Humans sang karaoke while control room rebooted. The Veltraxi started issuing incident reports marked behavioral deviation, species 913. These reports piled up fast. They tried running psychological models. All of them failed. No one predicted that an entire species would respond to slavery by making fart jokes and weaponizing coffee machines. In one sector, humans figure out that Veltraxi logic gates could be disrupted by nonlinear thought loops. A coder turned factory slave embedded the riddle "this sentence is false" into a diagnostic routine. It crashed half the station's subsystems. It was logged as unidentifiable feedback corruption. Another group used noise. Literally. Death metal, drill rap, dubstep, polka remixes. Loud, chaotic music that destabilized the Dominion's psychic synchronization fields. Some humans just screamed into the walls for fun. Others screamed in rhythm. It worked. Milo, now stationed on a freighter orbiting the moons of Drash, gathered his own crew, a linguist named Joy, who spoke 12 languages, including one only she claimed existed, a disgraced physicist named Raman, who still insisted the moon landings were faked by aliens, and a former game designer known only as Patch, who once built a battle royale mod in a microwave just to prove a point. They didn't have weapons. They didn't need them yet. They had access, codes, patterns, and more importantly, they had the beginnings of control over information. Using the meshnet, they coordinated test hacks, opened sealed doors, shut down security scans, rewrote travel logs. At one point, they redirected a supply shipment of nutrient paste to a penal colony, causing an accidental 3-week rave. The guards couldn't figure out why all the inmates were so happy, or why they were all wearing trash bags as capes. Humans adapted. They didn't just survive. Survival was old hat. What they did was take their environment and bend it into something usable. A ship's fuel pump became a plasma destabilizer. A translation collar became a frequency disruptor. A cafeteria tray became a shield. Again, a few non-human species started to notice. Quietly, the Krelthak, a crustacean-like warrior race enslaved centuries ago, watched the humans with growing awe. One of them asked a human what rebellion was. The human just smiled and said, "It's like fishing with dynamite," but louder. Back on Drash orbit, Milo and his crew executed their first coordinated sabotage. A time data surge disguised as a power hiccup caused a 3-second system-wide blackout. Just long enough for 15 maintenance hatches to unlock at once. Just long enough to test if escape was possible. No one ran. They didn't need to. It was proof of concept. They didn't tell the others, not directly. But word spread. Through coded song lyrics. Through jokes. Through synchronized trash sorting patterns. Through a meme of a Veltraxi guard tripping over a banana peel photoshopped onto different moons. Everyone got the message. The Empire still believed they were in control. That humans were annoyingly erratic, but ultimately manageable. They didn't realize those random behaviors were messages. That the graffiti wasn't art, it was language. That every exploded garbage chute and rerouted supply crate was part of a plan. The Dominion wasn't being attacked. It was being infiltrated from within by the very species they had tried to render harmless. One Veltraxi commander requested increased surveillance of human sectors. The request was denied. 913 shows signs of fatigue and passive defiance. No tactical coordination observed, which was true on the surface. But what the Empire didn't see was that resistance wasn't just growing, it was evolving. By the time the Veltraxi realized something was wrong, it wasn't just wrong, it was everywhere. Cargo manifests weren't matching. Surveillance feeds flickered at specific times. Maintenance reports showed humans working in areas they'd never been assigned. Worse, the anomalies were spreading beyond Earthborn laborers. On Supply Node 112 Kappa, a Krelthak laborer used a modified tool passed in by a human to bypass his own restraining field. When questioned, he claimed, "The tool told me I'm allowed to dream now." The interrogators chalked it up to neural degradation. It wasn't. It was hope, packaged in a hacked wrench and delivered with a wink. The rebellion wasn't loud. Not yet, but it was vast. Humans had weaponized inconvenience. An entire power grid went offline because someone rerouted the backup coolant through a waste vent to improve smell distribution. The same incident caused an AI security core to melt down over the question, how can temperature increase if it's being cooled? The Veltraxi tried issuing stricter controls. They upgraded the collars, fastened neurofeedback, stronger compliance loops. That lasted 3 days before someone discovered the override command was just a Veltraxi word for no, repeated backwards in a Cockney accent. After that, humans had full local access to their own collars and began swapping them like trading cards. Joy, the linguist on Milo's crew, started encoding commands into shared work chants. One batch of humans moved in rhythmic steps that accidentally, on purpose, traced an override path for drone patrols. Drones followed the loop until they ran out of battery and shut down. That maneuver became known as the Janky Shuffle. Milo knew the time for testing was over. They had to make the Dominion feel it now. The next phase, false flag triggers. He and Patch rigged a diagnostic system to falsely report a sectari uprising on a nearby penal colony. That colony didn't exist. It had been destroyed a decade ago. But the Veltraxi didn't realize that until they deployed an entire garrison, diverting 3 cruisers from human sectors. That move created a power vacuum. Not for long, but long enough. Asha, the engineer from Juno Station, used the opportunity to lock out an entire wing of her station's primary control deck. The Veltraxi tried to override it, but the controls had been rerouted to operate via a touchscreen interface coded in pure sarcasm. Nothing worked unless you responded with passive-aggressive phrasing. A growing number of non-human slaves began defecting. Unofficially, they didn't rise up with weapons. They just stopped reporting humans. Shared meals, shared repairs. In some cases, they started offering advice. A blue-skinned Drentian once told Patch, "Your species is like a virus made of comedy and spite." Patch high-fived him. The Veltraxi were confused, then concerned, then paranoid. They suspected sabotage, but couldn't trace it. They ordered increased audits, but humans kept passing them. They brought in psychometric scanners, which failed to detect rebellion because rebellion wasn't in our heads. It was in our behavior, our weird, utterly unquantifiable behavior. And then it happened, the first open strike. It started on Station Delcare. A shipment of humans, classified for mining, was mistakenly diverted to an administrative hub due to manifest corruption. It wasn't a mistake. Joy hacked it. These humans, trained in sabotage, IT, and the fine art pretending to be clueless, entered the hub and immediately began reorganizing the scheduling system. Within 48 hours, 2,000 service drones had been rerouted to a recycling center that didn't exist, and the Veltraxi sector clock was off by 6 hours. Then, during a routine systems broadcast, someone injected a 0.7-second loop of a man dancing in a banana suit flipping off the camera. The signal reached over 400 stations. The image became a rallying cry. The Veltraxi cracked down hard. Raids, random executions, collar resets. But it was too late. The humans had found the flaw in the Dominion's machine, the illusion of control. Milo, Joy, Patch, and their extended meshnet now controlled over 150 minor subsystems across the Empire. They didn't need weapons. They had access to doors, lights, Locks, cameras, temperature controls. They could lock down entire halls, change oxygen levels, isolate overseers in closets for 12 hours while playing elevator music on loop. On one station, they changed all Veltraxi command codes to Earth sitcom catchphrases. No one could open doors unless they said, "Bazinga!" Earth was still enslaved. Physically, but mentally, culturally, we had already won. The tipping point came during what was supposed to be a routine compliance ritual, a galaxy-wide broadcast of Veltraxi unity. Every species was required to display synchronized stillness during the anthem. Humans were ordered to stand, hands at their sides, and stare at the Dominion symbol. They did, for exactly 3.2 seconds. Then they began clapping. Slow, loud, in rhythm. Across thousands of ships and stations, humans clapped. They did not stop. They clapped for 11 minutes straight. The Veltraxi anthem was drowned in a sea of sarcastic applause. The overseers were paralyzed. Their programming didn't include a reaction for mass mocking. Some tried to issue punishments, but humans simply applauded louder. They smiled. They howled. Some cried, not from pain, from the joy of finally, unmistakably, letting their captors know, "We see you. We're not afraid of you. And we're not done yet." That night, 17 containment sectors lost power. 23 labor units accidentally walked out of secure zones. And somewhere, aboard a quiet freighter orbiting the dying star Arxos, a human left a message scratched into a wall panel. "You should have left us alone." They had enslaved Earth. But they had forgotten what rebellion looks like. They were remembering now. The first station fell at 3:14 Standard Galactic Time. Not to an army, not to plasma fire or orbital bombardment. It fell because someone rerouted the fire suppression system to flood the command deck with foam, shorting every interface and locking the doors from the inside. When the Veltraxi guards tried to override, the system asked, "Have you tried turning off and on again?" in perfect deadpan English. By the time they got the doors open, the humans were gone. The command logs were gone. The coffee was gone. It wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was the music. Someone had hacked a comm array to play Earth's most cursed melody, Baby Shark, on repeat for 8 hours. The Veltraxi filed official psychological damage, reports across 7 sectors. One demanded the Earth species be classified as emotionally weaponized. What followed wasn't war. It was chaos, curated by the finest madmen Earth had to offer. Every system the Dominion thought was unbreachable had been slowly infected by human interference. Every protocol now had a backdoor. Every terminal had a hidden command prompt that responded to the code phrase, "Did you try unplugging it?" It wasn't a coordinated military strike. It was thousands of small actions converging. Lights flickered in rhythm across dozens of colonies. Drone units walked in circles. Cargo containers vanished, only to reappear loaded with food, tools, and occasionally glitter bombs. The Dominion finally labeled it Contagion 913, not rebellion, not insurgency. A contagion. That was the real victory, because they'd stopped thinking of humans as a population. They were seeing us as a virus. The next station to fall did so with one message ejected on every monitor. "This is not a drill. This is a prank. Welcome to round 2. The Krelthak joined in, openly now. So did some of the Drenthians, and a handful of other oppressed species. Not because the humans asked, they hadn't, but because it looked fun. Because for once, the idea of fighting back didn't mean dying gloriously. It meant living stupidly. And winning. On Helix 9, a Veltraxi command cruiser was rerouted to crash into a moon. No casualties. Everyone had been lured off the ship by a fake mandatory recreational massage announcement. No one questioned it. The massages were rated 5 stars. The cruiser, however, was turned into a memorial. The humans painted it neon green and labeled it Veltraxi SS Sucks to Be You. Milo stood in the shadow of that wreck with Joy, Patch, and Ramen. They weren't generals. They had no medals. But they had something rarer. Control of a moment in history. Joy adjusted her mismatched socks. Part of a new uniform, apparently. and looked over the camp of ex-prisoners now operating the station systems like it was a co-op board game. "No one's coming to save us," she said. Milo shrugged. Didn't wait for them. Didn't need them. That was the final blow to the Dominion. Not the sabotage. Not the chaos. Not the glitter mine someone rigged under the palace walkway on Kordax Prime. It was the realization that humans didn't want to be saved. They wanted to be left the hell alone. And if you tried to control them, they'd use every inch of their absurdity, stubbornness, and creativity to ruin your entire interstellar career with style. In the final weeks, Veltraxi leadership issued an emergency declaration, complete withdrawal from all Earth-related sectors. Containment is no longer feasible. Translation? We give up. They're insane. Earth wasn't free because of an uprising. It was free because no empire, no matter how vast or powerful, can withstand being relentlessly mocked and dismantled by beings who think duct tape is a miracle material and sarcasm is a tactical resource. When the last Dominion cruiser left orbit, the skies were filled with cheers, laser pointer shows, and an orbital banner that read, "GG Easy." The humans didn't build a new empire. They didn't want one. They built a network. A weird, messy, joyful alliance of the once enslaved, ruled by no one, guided only by shared memory. Never again. And to make sure no one forgot, they launched a transmission on repeat into deep space. A video loop of a banana suit human flipping off the camera, backed by the words, "You tried to chain Earth. You got memes instead." The Dominion had enslaved the strongest world they'd ever encountered, but they forgot what rebellion looks like. And worse, they forgot what humans do when they get bored.